The entrepreneurial story is a great attention grabber. No stories are alike. Everybody has a different background, journey, and expertise as they bring something to the table. Welcome to Decoding Business with BBB. Today's guest works in 2 different languages, is a popular social media influencer, Emmy Award winner, and now setting her sights as business owner with her own fashion line. We're going to extract the highs and lows of a successful Latina entertainer, entrepreneur when we come back. This is Decoding Business Bureau serving the heart of Texas. We love to hear stories from across the gamut, from across different countries. To our guest today, she's hosted several English and Spanish programs for major networks across the Americas, worked with some really big names in the entertainment world, and now has launched her own fashion line, capturing her work as an influencer and entertainer. What's next, we're asking? Well, she is Puerto Rican host, producer, now entrepreneur, Pili Montilla. Welcome aboard, Pili. We're so glad to have you.
Yay! I'm so glad to be here as well. We've been trying to make this interview happen for a couple of months, and finally it's here. And you're such a great host, and your team is amazing. So it's an honor to be sharing a little bit of my story with you.
You know, you came highly recommended from our Emmy Award-winning video producer here that works in the office, Juan Marquez. And he said, you need to talk to some people that I know. And I said, perfect. Let's get those people on the hook. And he said, let's do it. And then, yes, you're right. Schedules go like this and they go back like this. And so we finally caught up with you. Thank you so much once again for being on.
No problem. Thank you.
So rewind it all the way to the background, Pili, to the start, how you got into the business as entertainer.
So I've always said that the entertainment industry chose me. I was 8 years old and my parents took me to see a chorus line on Broadway in New York. Mm-hmm. And at the very end, at the finale of the musical, I stood up and I started crying, and I looked at my dad and I said, this is what I want to do. Like, I was crying because it was, you know, entertaining people, it causes emotions. You're right. And I wanted to have that impact on people. I wanted to somehow or another impact their life in a positive way. And that's how I felt when I was just 8 years old in New York, watching that play. And ever since, I never looked back. I knew that entertainment was my calling. I knew that being on stage somehow, whether as an actor or as a host, was really my calling. So it actually came kind of easy to me.
And moving forward with your hosting with MTV, with Latin Grammys, I mean, how did that play? How did you know where you wanted to go from that point?
I mean, it's been a long journey. I studied acting. So I started modeling when I was in Puerto Rico. I'm born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I started modeling when I was in Puerto Rico. I was also an athlete and a dancer. So I was a ballerina and a tennis player. And yeah, I was pretty well-rounded, but that was all thanks to my parents. You know, my parents really wanted me to be well-rounded and disciplined in different arts and in sports as well. And kind of like one thing led to another. I ended up studying theater in Boston College. I went to London and studied with the Royal Shakespeare Company. Wow. And I thought that my calling was going to be acting, especially theater. I love the theater. But then, you know, I moved to New York, and then I was starving, like literally starving, because theater is a very, very hard, acting in general, just entertainment in general is a very hard career, right? It's very, let's not sugarcoat this. It's a very uphill and challenging path. Mm-hmm. And I knew that, but I also knew that there was no turning back. This is what I'm meant to do. So, kind of one thing led to another. So I studied acting in Boston, then in London, then I moved to New York. I was starving. I was a waitress. I was a cocktail waitress. I was, paying my dues. I was going to auditions, booking some, not booking most of them. And then I moved back to Puerto Rico, and my mom saw a little on the newspaper, there was an ad that was saying that MTV was opening a channel, a station in Puerto Rico. And my mom said, you should audition for this. And I was like, I'm not a host, I'm an actor. And she's like, you have the personality, just try it out. And she was right. I ended up, booking the gig. In all sincerity, I actually did not book the gig right away. I was the runner-up. They chose another girl.
Oh, okay.
And I was devastated because after that whole 3 month auditioning process with MTV, you can imagine it's MTV. So there's like a lot of, it's a long process to get cast for something like MTV. So after that long process and getting so close, I was devastated that I didn't book it. But 3 months afterwards, they called me and they're like, you know, the girl that we booked we didn't like working with her, and we want to work with you. And I was like thrilled. And then that was my school for 3 years, for 3 years. That's where I learned how to, because I am bilingual, like you mentioned in the intro, I learned how to be on camera and switch from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. That's where I learned how to produce. That's where I learned how to interview, because up until this point, all I knew was acting, not necessarily hosting. But I fell in love with the craft. I fell in love with the craft of hosting, being yourself in front of the camera, really showing who you are, being vulnerable, being funny, quick on your feet, all of that. And the rest is kind of history, kind of like MTV took me to Univision, and then I created my own show with Juan Marquez, and then the show is called Te Para Tres, and we interviewed Latin musicians. I'm clearly a big Latin music supporter. My shirt says support Música Latina, which is part of my fashion line. And so I just fell in love with hosting and especially interviewing Latin musicians.
Nice.
And through that show, which I created, hosted, and produced with Juan, we were nominated for 4 Emmys and ended up winning an Emmy. So it's just, it's like, it's kind of hard to put it in like a sentence or two, because the process has been long, and that's how it is when you're an entrepreneur, when you're in the arts. It's a process, and you never know. One thing kind of leads to another, and then another, and then another, and you set out to think that you're going to be an actor, and then you end up being a TV host and a producer. Like you just have to be open to change, and you just have to be open to diversifying yourself and exploring different fields.
There you go. 2 things I pulled out of that paragraph, Pili, is that one, somebody else saw something in you that maybe you didn't see. That was your mother picking you out and saying, I think you'd be good for this. Another thing is you opportunity landed, and you weren't the first choice, but opportunity broke for you. So always holding out hope that there's another chance or another shot, and you got that.
100%. And also visualizing. I believe a lot in visualization. So, I was in Puerto Rico with MTV for 3 years, like I mentioned, and that was definitely my school. But while being in Puerto Rico, there was a national network called LATV that I used to watch, right? So it's this national bilingual network called LATV. Back then, they were super cool, super hype. They knew like all of the Latin cool artists. And I would watch it in Puerto Rico, and I would visualize myself on stage, and I would visualize myself holding the microphone that said LATV. And I kept visualizing myself. And then one day I Googled who the talent manager of the station was. And I sent him my bio, my reel, my resume. And I told them why I was interested in being part of LATV. I had been in Puerto Rico for 3 years. I absolutely loved MTV, but it didn't pay that much. And Puerto Rico is a small island. So I wanted, I've always been very ambitious. So I wanted something bigger. So LA obviously is the capital of entertainment. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be my next step. I'm going to go from this small little island in the Caribbean to the capital of entertainment. And so his name was Lalo. I sent him everything, and he said, well, why don't you start producing and packaging stories and interviews in Puerto Rico and send them to us, and we'll see what happens. And so that's what I did. And I did that, not letting MTV know. So sometimes you have to cheat the system.
I get you. Yeah.
That's the moral of that story, because I knew that MTV saw LATV as a competitor. So I knew that if I told them, they'd say no. And so eventually that's what ended up happening. So in LATV, they're like, we loved what you send us. I sent them 5 stories. And then they're like, why don't you come to LA for an on-camera audition? And I had never been to LA. Mm-hmm. And I had never done an on-camera audition, which means that I am on air for 2 weeks, and they see whether the ratings spike or not. So if the ratings spike, then, they're onto something. And for this, I had to take 2 weeks off of MTV. So I had to tell them. And they were like, if you leave, you're done. Like,
Yeah.
So I left MTV, went to LA, which I'd never been to LA, and auditioned for LA TV, knowing that I didn't have anything nothing to fall back on, because MTV was like, if you're doing this, and it was the best decision I made. You know, I a week into it, they were like, here's your contract. And that's kind of like what brought me to LA.
Yay. You know what? A lot of times I can visualize this, because you said this before, that you had to put yourself in the place where you wanted to be. And yes, many times people have to make that leap of faith and say, this is what I want to do. And it's going to, if it backfires, this is my fail plan. But many times you have to kind of do things in motion when nobody's looking.
In sincerity, like, I think we all know at this age that nothing is failure, like, I mean, you can look at it as that, you can choose to look at it as failure, but it's really not, because whether I had not booked LA TV or not, I probably would have stayed in LA, and so who knows what would have happened from that. It's like every decision takes you to something else that you don't know what that looks like. You don't know what that's going to feel like.
There you go.
But you got to put yourself out there, and you got to take chances. You got to take risks. You got to move out of your comfort zone. And sometimes you got to say no, sometimes you got to say no. So like MTV was like, if you leave, and I was like, you know what, I'm doing this. So
good for you. Good
yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Time to name drop. Which artists, mainstream producers, actors did you enjoy or work with the most, and those that you enjoyed working with the most?
Right. So in terms of interviewing, I loved interviewing Pitbull. I think he is such a businessman. Like, I think we all see him as this amazing star and artist, which he is, but underneath all of that, he's really wise. He's really a businessman. He approaches the music industry as the business it is. And that's why I think he's been able to survive for so long.
Very cool.
And in terms of like working, I did a huge holiday campaign with Eugenio Derbez, who's a very famous comedian from Mexico, but he has done the crossover to Hollywood. And I mean, being on set with Eugenio Derbez was such a gift, such a blessing. We were laughing left and right. Like, I don't even know how we ended up shooting like 30 commercials, because we were just cracking up with him on stage, on the studio. He's just a marvelous human being, and I truly enjoyed working with him.
Good to hear. You made the transition, Pili, from entertainer to starting your own Latina-owned fashion brand. Now, how did you maximize your background? How did you use what you did before and use it to leap into this?
100%. Good question. So I am the co-owner and the CMO, the chief marketing officer of a Latina-owned fashion brand called Carla & Co, Carla with a K. And Carla & Co was founded by another Puerto Rican in 2017. And she and I met in 2018 at a summit, like a conference in LA it's called We All Grow. And it's the biggest Latina influencer conference in the entire nation. And I was there as a speaker, and she was there selling her merchandise. And she recognized who I was. She knew who I was. She and I had never met before, but she came up to me and she's like, I know who you are. I've seen you on TV. I grew up with you. Here's a gift. And she gave me a shirt from Carla & Co that I still have to this day that says, I can laugh in English and in Spanish. And I thought that was super humorous. I thought it was like witty, smart, super cute, loved it. And she and I stayed in touch. And then during the pandemic, I was in Arizona, and I took a picture and posted on my Instagram. And she's like, hey, I live in Arizona. So she and I started connecting more as friends. And just as, I wanted to help her. I wanted to use my network. I saw how hard she was working, and I really believed in her product. And it's been a while now that as myself, which I am a brand, Pili Montilla is a brand. And I am, just like I was saying, how Pitbull is a businessman, I got to approach it like that. Like, because of the industry that I'm in, my name is a brand. I am a brand per se. So my brand wanted to partner up with another Latina brand. And I've been looking for a long time, like, what is it? What is it going to look like? And it just, it turned out to be Carla, and it was super organic and it was beautiful. I wanted to help her with my network, with my celebrity friends, putting the word out. And that kind of like evolved into what it is now. So I became co-owner and, like I said, CMO of the company. And I just recently launched my own collection within Carla & Co. So within Carla & Co, there's a music collection called Música. And it's all about supporting Latin music. It's about, I love Música Latina. It's about supporting those bands that we grew up with. So it's a super fun line, and I'm super proud of it, and it's selling really well. So
that is awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, back to your question is like, how did I use my influence and my experience to further this company, right? And it's, like I mentioned, using my network of celebrity influencers and friends, using my connections with different brands. Through my connection with Toyota, Carla & Co was able to do a campaign with Toyota this year. So it's leveraging that, it's like all these years that I've been in the industry and all these people that I've been able to meet. And I've always known to keep the door open. You never know who you're going to work with again.
Exactly.
It happens that last week we did a video shoot for Carla & Co. Talking about like where the brand started, where it is now, where we're heading, how Carla and I connected and I became part of the company, all of that. So it was a 2-day video shoot, super long, beautiful, very good, like high production. The guy, one of the cameraman, him and I worked at a Walmart project 7 years ago. I didn't remember, but he remembered. And one of the reasons that he said yes to this project, to working with Carla & Co, was because he remembered the experience that he had working with me 7-8 years ago. You never know. And this goes to any industry. So those of you who are small business owners out there who are listening to this podcast, it's really important for you to know to keep the doors open, because you never know when that person is going to come back, when you're going to bump into them, when you're going to need them. It's, be nice.
So few words, right? Be nice.
Be nice.
That's a common tale. Somebody has the smarts in this, somebody has the smarts in this, the business mind, the marketing mind, they come together as partners and it works. You just gel together, right? That's a common tale among entrepreneurial organizations.
100%. Yeah. No, knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and bringing that to the table. And, I let Carla do her thing, and she is good at creating and all this. And like, I'm good at marketing and I'm good at creating too, but in different ways, and I leave the rest of the team to do what they're good at. And I don't get in their business because they're there because that's what they're good for.
Correct.
Yeah.
In marketing, Pili, businesses must differentiate. They must separate themselves from their competitors. So as a brand influencer, ambassador, how do you tell brands or other companies to stand out? How do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself, in your words?
I think being genuine is extremely important, like having a real voice. We are in that era where like reality is what people want. People want to connect, whether it's with a brand or with a human being. And that's where you start building loyalty, is when a person sees themselves reflected in your brand, reflected in your marketing. It can be aspirational, but it also has to be achievable. Like, make sure that the way that you market and you brand yourself is loyal and real to your brand, but it's also attainable to your client. I think that's super important. And I think it's really important to just stay genuine. And if you mess up, because we all mess up, own it.
There you go. Got you. Talk to us. You know what? This is different because you're working in dos idiomas. Talk to us about working in 2 different languages. Lots of cultural considerations for a business to know. What are your thoughts on talking to a Spanish dominant audience and then talking to an English language audience? I mean, there's nuances. There's little fine lines you walk and you don't cross. So what would you tell a company that's looking to venture out into the Latin world or the Latino world? How do you consult those?
It's very easy. Hire a Latino.
There you go.
Hire a Latino. I see this so often, Jason, where brands hire a minority,
Mm-hmm.
but not maybe a Latino.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different nuances and different cultures and different traditions within minorities. Like as Latinos, we're different from Blacks, and Blacks are different from Native Americans, and Native Americans are different for Asians. So a lot of companies, especially big brands, hire one person who's a minority, so LGBTQ plus or Latino, to handle all of the minority. And it's like, that is impossible, because I don't know how to speak to necessarily the Asian culture, So if you're interested in tapping into the US Hispanic market, make sure that you hire someone that is part of the US Hispanic community, that speaks that language, that knows the culture, that knows the traditions and the nuances. It's very simple. Don't try to check, and very important, and don't try to check that box like, oh yeah, no, like hire someone that's actually going to do the work and speak. And when I say speak our language, I don't mean Spanish. I mean like speak our language, like know the nuances, know the culture, know the roots.
Right. I've seen so many companies run translators, and they will offer a product or a service in Spanish, but then they miss a lot of the cues. They miss a lot of that connection, and it's simply just a lot of things get missed in translation, if you would say, lost in translation.
100%. Yeah. Google Translate won't do the work for you. It's a tool, but it's not the end all be all.
So your advice is to find somebody who's ingrained in the culture that you want to speak to already, and find those people and use those people and hire them, contract with them for sure.
I mean, it's so logical. Hire someone from that community.
Right. You tell us about some times you struggled or challenges to find success, and your thing was not finding failure, because failure is not an option, and it's not how you define it. It's the next challenge, the next struggle. Tell us about a time, and you mentioned a few little pieces of nuggets in your story about when you were struggling, but tell us about a time when you truly found success. You had to challenge yourself to find success in your industry.
I still do. I still challenge. I am still challenged, and I still, struggle sometimes. Like, let's keep it real. I am very blessed to have had the career that I've had and the success that I've had, and that till this day, I continue to do what I love. I've never had a 9-to-5 job. I've always been on set or creating or doing my own thing. And that's a blessing. However, there's many challenges. The way that I look is not your stereotypical Latina. So it's till this day, sometimes Latinos don't see me as Latina. I mean, the other day on Instagram, a guy said, "You're just a Karen, you're just a white." And I was like, whoa, where's this coming from, dude? I'm like, I'm Puerto Rican. He's like, yeah, Puerto Ricans don't count, they're white. And I'm like, why are we making this like a race issue? Like, it was really odd, but I still get that, and he was Latino. So, and then obviously I don't fit into the Americanos, because I speak with my hands and I have an accent and I talk like a Latina and I do not hide my Latina-ness,
Oh, there you go.
So that's one thing. And also, there was a huge learning back when I was at LA TV, like I told you. So I went from MTV in Puerto Rico to LA TV in LA. And I was at LA TV for about almost 4 years. And I had 4 shows with them. It was beautiful, beautiful time in my life. And they laid me off. And they said, quote unquote, I mean, I could have sued them for this, but I didn't. But they said, you are too well-rounded and educated for our audience. And that was that was such a slap in the face, but it was so good for me to hear how, like, the reality of the industry and how my people, mi comunidad, the US Hispanics, how media controls us and keeps us ignorant, uneducated. And that's the moment that I realized my real passion and my real calling. And it was to only create content that's going to uplift us, not keep us at a certain level. Right. So, I worked with Univision for a very short time. I worked for Univision for less than a year, and it was horrible.
Mhm.
It was horrible. All they wanted was chisme, chisme. And I was like, no, this is not what I want.
Mhm.
And that was what made me and kind of forced me in a way to create Te Para Tres, the show that I did with Juan Agustin Marquez. He's a multiple Emmy award winning director. We had it for 4 years. Lexus, the car company, bought it. It was super successful. We won an Emmy. It ran for 4 years on Mega TV, which is a national network. And, you know, we were telling the stories of Latin musicians and their struggles and how they inspire us through their music and their craft. It's a beautiful show, you know, there's no chisme, there's no tonterías, there's, you know, and that's what I'm proud of, you know, and that's what I want to continue to do, is create content that's going to celebrate and uplift my culture.
Yes, good for you in finding your value and what you bring and what you wanted to do, because you're right. That's a total new podcast right there. A topic is finding out what truly drives mainstream media and what boxes they're putting you in to produce content. So love it that you found your value and what you wanted to do. You spoke about Lexus and one of those major sponsors. At Better Business Bureau, our mission is to be the leader in advancing marketplace trust. Now, working with some of these big sponsors, Walmart, Starbucks, how important is trust in what you do? When you take on a client or a celebrity endorsement package, how important is the word trust to you? What does trust mean in Pili's mind?
100%. Trust is really important because my followers trust me. So I have to make sure that when I partner up with a brand, it's a brand that I trust myself and that I enjoy either driving or going shopping to, or enjoy their tea, you know, like it depends on the brand, right? It has to be a brand that I believe in and that I believe in what they're doing. You know, Walmart is a great example. Walmart, you know, many people don't know the amazing things that Walmart does for their associates and for the community in general. I mean, for Hurricane Maria, Walmart was the first to land in Puerto Rico and help with food and shelter. Wow. The first. Walmart has an amazing education program for their associates that people don't know. They give $1 a day, I think, from their paycheck, and they can cover for their college costs.
Wow, nice.
You know, it's just little things that people, and that's why I'm an influencer for Walmart. It's to spread the goodness, you know. A lot of great wellness plans that they have as well. They have wellness days every three months where you can go and get, you know, free vaccines, free exams, etc. And also, I like to work with brands that are open to listening. It is a team effort. So if it's a brand that I talk to and I see that they're very set on their ways and they are unwilling to understand my audience, then it's not going to work, because it's when you work with a brand, it's a dance, it's a relationship. So you have to understand what their goals and their vision is. And then you have to realize, okay, does it align with my goal and my visions? And if it's a fuck yes, then you go for it. If it's not a fuck yes, it's a no.
Wow.
And people that you sit down and you can create something fun together. You know, I don't like to work with brands that are like, this is what we're doing and I have no say in it. I like brands that are open to brainstorming together, to creating together, and to like pushing boundaries and doing things differently. And I don't work with anything that's not fun anymore.
There you go. You know, so there's things you say no to then, right? There's
100%. Yeah, there's things that, you know, that don't align. Like, you know, Coca-Cola is probably not a brand that would align with me, because I don't drink Coke. You know, I don't drink soda. You know, Pampers, I don't have kids, you know, it's like,
okay, right.
Yeah, it has to be aligned with my brand and my interest and my audiences, because they follow me for a reason. So if I bombard them with something that they are completely like unfamiliar with in my world, then they'll be very confused, and that's not what you want.
Right. And Pili, a lot of brands are taking stances politically, religiously, worldviews. They really are getting out there. Let's just throw one out there. Nike. They truly take a stance, and you have to make sure you align with that stance as well as an influencer if you're working with them, correct?
100%. I try to stay away from politics, but there are especially one thing, which is women's rights and our autonomy to our body, that is extremely important to me. So, women's rights and pro-choice is extremely important to me. So and vote. I'm always encouraging everybody to vote. I'm an influencer for Voto Latino. And that's another thing that I'm very passionate about. So in terms of women's rights and voting, you will hear me, but I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I don't get into that. I try to stay away from politics, but those two are very important to me. So, if it's obviously a very religious or, very pro-life brand, it's definitely not going to be aligned with my values.
There you go. Good for you. Final question, Pili. What is your advice for that next Pili Montilla, that next entrepreneur, influencer, entertainer? What do you tell, even if she's Latina and she's wandering around, or an entrepreneur that needs that next step? What do you tell them? What's your advice for them?
Stay true to who you are. Diversify yourself. It's good to have a mission, a goal, a north, but be okay if it takes you in different directions. Go with the flow, experience and explore that other direction that life may be taking you, because you never know where it's gonna end up, and it might be even better than what you had envisioned.
There you go.
So be open to change. Be malleable. Is that a word, right? Malleable or no?
I think it is. You're right.
Right? Yeah. Just go with the flow, como, and believe in yourself. Just go for it. Really go for it. Take that risk. Take that challenge. Push yourself. Push the boundaries. Do things differently. Really look out and see, okay, what's out there that's not being done, and how, or if it's being done, how can I give it my own twist and make it mine?
Beautiful. Yeah. Nice. Okay, great. You know what? Your background, your journey, expertise, your story, Pili, is I think what people are latching on to if they've listened. Where can they find you next? Where do they go to look for your work?
Yes. Please follow me on all social media, Pili Montilla, PiliMontilla. I am most active on Instagram. And I do answer my DMs and I do answer comments. So find me there. And of course, check out Carla & Co, Carla with a K. And we're a unisex brand, and we're known for our shirts and our humor and celebrating our Latina culture. So check it out.
Nice. You know what? I get to thank you very much, not only for connecting us with this world, two different languages, two different worlds, but also just your knowledge and just dropping it out there for us and just saying, you know what, chew on this. This is exactly how I landed in this business. This is what you can take away from it. So we need to thank you for doing that for us today.
I just hope that someone is inspired by it, and that someone takes a risk. Just, if one of you listen to this, I hope you walk out and walk out of listening to this and take a risk. If just one of you does that, I'm happy. Mission accomplished.
There you go. And credit to Pili. Say, you know what? I did it because Pili inspired me to do XYZ, and I'm here because of that. I hope that they attribute your success, and they let you know about that for sure. Pili, thank you once again so much for being here. And I will talk to you very soon. And we will be following you. We'll be cheering you from the cheap seats, the bleachers, watching your success as we see you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing a little bit more of my story.
Thank you, Pili.